ready to go ahead and get started? Okay. Get my notes here. Okay, so we will go ahead and get started with the May 1st work session for our regular town council meeting coming up on Tuesday. Again, we're not making any votes tonight or taking any votes, just reviewing information. So first up, we have discussion of the minutes from the previous meeting on April 1st. Are there any questions about those? For that last page, the last bullet point, I think was that Scott Glover, were you the one that brought this up? The minutes, look on the last page, the last bullet point. Was that you or was that mine? I was thinking it was Scott.
I was on.
That's okay. The last
on the research on term limits, home rule, etc.
It's kind of both.
Yeah,
we both on that.
Okay.
I'll add Scott to that.
Yeah. Because I know that was a topic you wanted as well.
I think I brought it up during work session.
Okay. Okay, are there any questions about the minutes? If not, we will move on to the budget and finance section, and as all of you should have in front of you, Misty has prepared a new spreadsheet for us that she had some assistance with, and she can fill us in on how this new spreadsheet came about and how to read it, because it is a little bit different than what we were looking at previously.
Different.
Yes.
But if you'll look at the other report first, because I ran both of
you
them.
ran both.
Yes.
Never put that in.
So, again, 75% or more is good on revenue. 75% or less is good on expenditures. So if you look at the bottom line, 96.02%, so that's quite more than the 75%. And then down at the expenditures, the 67.56% is less than 75%. The thing that you're going to notice the difference about is our drug account. So the state 3A pretty much stays the same. It will go up every month when we deposit that check, but the drug fines are represented on here. So the $12,017.75. So that's going to be on here too, so you guys can see that. The local government investment pool. Again, the correlating spreadsheet on the back. So we had 4.29% in March, which gave us $7,081.84 to add to it. So the total we have in there right now is the $1,950,742.27. Now the new spreadsheet. So I contacted our sister town, Kingston Springs, and I told her that a lot of the councilmen would rather have it presented in a spreadsheet. Asked her what she used, and she sent it over to me. So this is a format that she uses. It has what is budgeted on the first column, what has been realized at the month that we're representing, so that would be March, what we have remaining, and what is projected. So some of these I have to go down through and correct, because we may know something that the formula doesn't, as far as, I was plugging it in and it was projecting for next year too. And it was projecting a number like for the in lieu of taxes, considerably high, because the reason it was so high this time was because of the internet, the Ignite that's going around. That's why they had to pay us more. So I had to go ahead and recalculate. So, you know, take a good look at it. If you see anything, if you question anything, let me know. I'll look at it, research it. But I haven't quite completely filled it out. If you notice the descriptions in the back couple of pages, I haven't gotten it in there.
Can you educate me on what is projection? Is that projection for next year?
No, at the end of the year. So, like,
Oh, that's projecting what you think we'll be at?
yes.
Got it.
So it's looking at your budget and what you budgeted, where you are right now in it, and what's remaining and what they think is going to happen. So,
Into the fiscal year.
yes, into the fiscal year.
They're projecting we're gonna sell a whole lot more beer.
Well, it is getting warm outside, so, you know.
So,
But this also breaks it down by department. It'll show you what you're spending in healthcare, Social Security, Medicare, retirement, all of that. It breaks it down every line in every department. Any questions?
one last element, just as an idle, forgive me if I interrupted, I'm sorry, Scott. I love the breakdown. Is there a way that we could designate controllables versus uncontrollables? Like, for instance, like utility services, that's an uncontrollable, we can't affect that.
Right.
So that way it would allay very quickly for our eyes, and I think that would probably just be a one go over, it would probably copy paste every month, but that way we could quickly see what's something we could do to change that number versus, well, it is what it is.
Right.
Just an idea.
I can work on that.
I was just going to ask what column percentages of projection.
I'll have to actually click on that and see what it is. I plugged in the numbers.
But if you can't, it's okay.
Okay.
This is so beautiful.
Well, thank you.
It is really good, thank you so much.
Well, and something that I really liked was she has in here, when it comes in, the things that we get from the state, you know, what months you can be looking for that. Trying to find the business taxes, because I thought it said May.
Spreadsheet, it's, I don't know, like seven.
Yep, there it is.
7 or 8 down.
Which we had discussed last time, because I was like, I'm pretty sure May is like a grace period, and they all usually get it in by then. There we go, and if you guys like this, I can continue to do it, and, just do the local government investment pool on a, add it to the new sale.
Something extra in your stocking for Christmas.
Well, I mean, Kelly, seriously, she might need something a little extra in her stocking, because I reached out and she was like, yeah, let me see what I get mine, and I'm like, hey, that's beautiful, I'll take it.
She took yours.
All right, do we have any questions over it? This one is simplified, so if you guys would rather have a simple one to look at, instead of,
No, I find this more simple.
okay.
It's simpler by far.
Okay. All right.
Why, since you mentioned it, why is health insurance so high?
Because that's the rates that we
There's a lot of people
pay.
out.
That's a common question across America.
Yeah.
Hey there, maybe I brought you in, I'm sorry. Hello.
Projected salary is less than invested.
Well, so, I know in the police department, it kind of fluctuates, because I know he was short, at times. And, are you talking about general or the police department? General government. And that can be affected by a lot of things. We did have some money set aside to do consulting, and we had someone opt out of that. So that may be why we're going to be coming in less than what we projected for the board.
What is OASI?
It's a combination of your Medicare and Social Security.
Somebody not been ordering office supplies? If it just gets different.
I think this will help us better to prepare too. And it does have your special funds on the back, so you can see your state street aid and your drug fund.
It is I jest, but it is a real question. What is up with office supplies? Because we budgeted for $268,000, and we're now projected to only spend $22,000. That's a pretty big deal.
Is that?
There's something
Okay,
that got
let me
lumped
find
in.
that. If it's administrative, see, I'm used to working off of this now, so let's see.
Gotcha. That would probably
Yep.
make sense. This scanner?
Yes. So those are some, remember we did put some in there for cybersecurity. We ended up getting the grant. Yay. So we're going to come in under budget.
And the grant for the fire department is not in here yet because we haven't completed all of that paperwork. Is that correct?
Look. And I would have to say it's receipted.
Okay.
So it is more than likely receipted in the general government grant area, but we have the amended budget that we're going to look at that's going to change the expenditures of the fire department for the grant area.
What was the machinery and equipment item? Because I'm assuming that the machinery and equipment under fire department was debt service, or most likely a truck. But above, under police department, the machinery and equipment, is that the vehicles? Sorry, I know I'm throwing.
Is it okay?
But then we didn't budget for it, so that's the question.
Yes. So, and that's on the amended too,
Gotcha.
so that we can put that in.
Okay.
So like I said, it will be filled out in better detail on the back pages as soon as I can sit down and do it.
Okay, any other questions before we move on? Okay, we will move on to item number 3, which is discussed on first reading an ordinance amending the fiscal year 2024-2025 Town of White Bluff budget, which is also our current year budget. So, do you want to discuss this as well?
Yes. So, the general fund, we got the grants, we got some donations, we had loan proceeds, like for the police vehicles and the fire truck, the tanker. So we we're going to amend the expenditures, but I talked to John Poole, and he said, go ahead and amend the revenue too, so that when you're looking at your budget, you can see where the revenue came in and where it's going out. So we did revenue first. I went ahead and we've got loan proceeds in there of $815,500. That's the fire truck and the police vehicles. I also added loan proceeds into our report so that I could take it out of miscellaneous, so that it would give a clearer view of where the money is, what it's for. Grants, we got the cybersecurity grant, and we also got the cybersecurity grant we already had in there. Sorry, I'm stuck on that. We got the grant for the fire department, so we amended the revenue there. And the library was a donation of $5,000, so we amended that so that she could spend it. And if you turn the page and go to expenditures, the general fund, the police department, it went up. We added that for the cars from $840,996 to $1,200,996.
Why did it go up so significantly from what we had budgeted for the cars?
300, well, because you're taking your original expenditures and you're adding $360,000 to that.
I thought we budgeted for those loans for the cars.
I'm sorry, what?
I thought, I must be mistaken. I thought we'd already included those expenditures in the original budget to purchase the vehicle, so why are we having to add more?
So we're balancing it out. You do have when you get in a large amount of money, it's like a capital purchase. It comes in, it goes out. One lump sum coming in, one lump sum going out. When you're paying for them, that's a debt service. So that's why there's a difference. There's going to be a lower payment, which is a yearly payment, and then there's going to be that one lump sum to show that the money went out. So it went out to the Ford place, long time. The whole amount went there. But we didn't just pay for those. We actually got a loan. So we're paying yearly to First Federal on that loan. So that's why it's going out twice.
Yeah. Okay.
Fire department, expenditures went from $401,549 to $888,049. Same example there. It comes in, it goes out, but we have to represent it here in our budget that it came in and went out.
Because I understand double entry bookkeeping. Why was that not? I thought that we had already put that in there, though, assuming that there was going to be income and expenditure there.
I think when I looked at the budget, it had $62,000 down there. I think Melody had estimated the yearly payment, but not the total amount for all the vehicles.
Okay.
The library department, their expenditures went from $33,000 to $38,000 to account for that $5,000 donation so that they can spend it. Street aid fund. So we didn't have the budget passed before we had to pay a street lighting. So we went ahead with what we had been doing, and we paid it out of the street aid fund. So we have to amend that to show that that 4,400 payment, $4,958 payment came out of there when it was actually when we budgeted it, we passed it to come out of the street department and not the state street aid.
And that's all of the amendments. I did learn something. You don't have to do line items anymore. It used to be very strict. You had to line item, line item, line item. Then they got a little relaxed. The counties still have to do that. They got a little relaxed with the municipalities, and then it was department. So if the department has this much, they could spend this much. It didn't matter where it came out of. And then I talked to the auditor, and he said now they're doing the whole budget. So if all in all we budget $5 million, and as long as it doesn't matter which department, if they go over their budget, as long as it doesn't go over $5 million at the total expenditures, then we're still good. We don't have to do amendments. Made it a lot easier for me.
Okay, so any questions about the amendments? And this is, on Tuesday, this will be a first reading, is that correct?
Correct. And then I'll have public hearing, and second reading at the June.
Okay.
So this is not like last year where we had to amend the budget because we needed to spend more money. We just had to account for what in a different fashion.
I think this time it's based more off of grants or donations, whereas in the previous year it was because there were unanticipated expenses.
I mean, last year there was going to be a shortfall. We estimated a shortfall, so we had to go ahead and amend it to include what the shortfall was. But this is not what we're doing this year.
It doesn't hurt. That was an unseen expenditure, so we had to amend for that.
Yeah, when you amend your budget, you're really, I mean, including revenues, good practice, you're in charge of expenditures, right? So this amendment is saying we're spending more on this item than we had anticipated, and technically the government can't go above that number until you bless it, right? Or you run out of money, so you're doing it now before the end of the year so that it balances up. But every time you do a budget amendment, it's because either a particular category or overall, you're spending more than that cap you effectively put on the budget when you pass the big budget, which you'll start seeing towards the middle of the year. So it's always about spending more money than you had originally anticipated with the budget you passed 9-10 months ago. Now, the reason that they vary across the board, it just depends year to year.
Okay, so moving on to codes and permits, item number 4, discuss the second and final reading ordinance to amend the Town of White Bluff zoning ordinance by amending Article 2, definitions, amending Article 3, general provisions, Section 3.100, accessory use regulations, and adding Article 4, supplementary provisions applying to specific districts, Section 4.120, provisions for conditional use accessory dwelling units, and we will have a public hearing Tuesday evening preceding this agenda item.
It's a long agenda.
Yes, that's a mouthful. Yeah.
Mayor, if I may, I'll go ahead and recap this for the council. Obviously, this came from the Planning Commission, came to you. There was significant debate about subsection F in ownership. New language was created in that meeting with some directives to me. I took that language to the Planning Commission earlier this month, and so just so you know what you're looking at, when you look at subsection F there, the last sentence is part of what you added. I'll just read it. The application for an accessory dwelling shall only be approved if the applicant or owner resides on the property, or the applicant or owner intends to reside on the property as determined by the BZA. So that was one of the things we talked about is because the BZA is a quasi-judicial body, they'll be able to take in evidence and see what the intent is. I know some members up here were concerned, like, hey, look, the builder's building it, but I've contracted with them, can they go ahead and put that accessory dwelling? What is in highlighted was what was deleted by this body. The planning commission unanimously rejected those deletions and wanted them back in, so that is what's here for your consideration. Now, if you choose to delete some or parts of that, you are free to do so on Tuesday night, because the planning commission has now weighed in on that new language. They blessed the last sentence, but the planning commission wanted to keep the language that limits the occupancy to immediate family members as defined here, being parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, children, grandchildren, or siblings of the property owner, and that it may not be leased or rented or sold separately from the principal unit, and family members may contribute to the property. So that is for your consideration and vote Tuesday night. Obviously, Amanda and I are here to answer any questions you have on this language or any other part, but this was the part that went back to the planning commission and you have their response.
My legal question is, if I build the accessory unit, let's say this passes, I build the accessory unit, can I move into the accessory unit and rent my main resident to him?
So this came up at the planning commission meeting, and so my response then, as it is now, is we really don't have the ability to regulate the principal structure. If you want to rent it, lease it, we've got some Airbnb regulations if you're doing short term, but you really have a lot of freedom with your principal structure, because you only get one per, parcel, however big or small that parcel is. This is a much more constrained secondary use, is how I'm going to define it, but the accessory use, accessory dwelling here. So you'd be regulating that. You're the owner. You can be in it. What you do with the primary residence is up to you. Leave it vacant, rent it to anybody. It's just saying the accessory dwelling is going to have these restrictions.
I'm really, really torn, as you can all tell from the last powwow. On one hand, to me, I don't want every house on my street to have an accessory dwelling with a renter in it. I don't think that's a good idea. But on the flip side of that, if all I got to do is move to the accessory unit, or, as Roy said, if I attach it with a roof line, it is no longer an accessory unit, it is an addition, and I can rent that out because it's part of the main structure. So
It's like renting out a room.
Yes, and so I don't know, I don't know that you're accomplishing in this what is intended, because there's so many ways around it legally. And I hate to step on property rights when you can do it anyway with just a little bit extra effort to avoid this. So that's where I'm at, but I'm open to conversation.
I agree with you. I see it as nothing but stepping on property owners' rights, because if I'm of the mindset to make this as cashable and property as I want to, I would pad split the 3-bedroom, 2-bath into now a 5-bedroom. I can do that legally. I would add an accessory dwelling unit, but I'd add a nice little adjoined roof line crosswalk to it. Now it's part of the primary. Per Roy, that's entirely fine. Now I can add 2 more bedrooms to it if I want to. I can make myself a mini apartment, basically, if I was of that mindset. So this is not going to accomplish stopping any of that. What this will accomplish is stopping a well-meaning law-abiding citizen who ends up with an ADU. Their mom has passed away. They had her out in the guest house or whatever, ADU, and now they decided to expand their means, renting it out to their church member's young son. That's what this is going to stop. It's not going to stop somebody who's going to just go after it for rentals. And so I view this as just stepping on property owners' rights, and the wrong people that we're trying to go after. So that's my 2 cents.
How many people I'm talking from just my standpoint, do you really think are going to move out of their larger home? Because if my husband suggested that we moved in, he could do that. But what I'm saying is, how many people do you think are actually going to try to get around that by moving into a much smaller dwelling?
I think, to be fair, I think the majority of people would not choose that option unless financially they have a choice. Let's just say that you know, your husband's passed away and you're living in the big house and you've got this accessory dwelling and you can't afford your payment or your or whatever it is. I think by doing this, we would force them to move to a smaller dwelling so that they could rent the bigger dwelling to make ends meet. I don't think they would do it out of desire to.
Just to do it.
Yes, I agree with you.
I think we're hurting the wrong person here.
And I am concerned that what I feel is the reason we're trying to do this, because, you know, I think if you're not careful, everybody and their mama, money's tight for everybody, is like, oh, I'll just build an accessory shed and rent that out, and that'll be an extra $800 a month. And so if everybody on that street does that, you know, is that an issue? I'm open to discussion on that as well. Is that a problem? I mean, if that happens?
I would also argue most people are not minded that way to expand their means that way. Most people
I would agree, yeah.
they'll go buy a new car before they look to expand their means.
Yeah. So, you know.
Can we just monitor it and see how it goes, and just like our billboard situation, you know?
I'm open for discussion. I'm just in reviewing how to sidestep this is where my concern lies, because there's so many ways to do that. I mean, if we were to pass this and I were going to build an accessory dwelling, even for my family members, I would attach it with a roof line because of this ordinance, because now you can't touch me. I can do whatever I want to do. So if I'm going to spend the money to build it anyway, why not just attach it to the dwelling? And that's my concern. It's like I'm not going to even attempt to follow this. I'm just going to go around it completely. Now, I may be 1 in 100 that thinks that way.
But, and who you're hurting, and I'll give a real life example. I had this sweet couple down in Bain, Alabama, church with her. They took care of his elderly mom. So they built an ADU on their property to take care of his elderly mom. His wife got cancer. She beat it, thankfully. Once the mom passed away, they had medical bills they had to pay for. What do you think they did with that ADU? They put somebody they knew, loved, and trusted from the church in that ADU to help expand their means to help pay her now medical bills. And that's who we're hurting. We're not hurting people like you, Ryan. Because like you said, you're going to get around it anyways.
And my biggest concern with this is what we added right here at the Planning Commission approved, is that I don't want to buy Jacob's house, who has an accessory dwelling already, and rent Jacob's house to one tenant and Jacob's accessory shed to the other, and I don't have to live there at all. Because now you're letting me basically do duplexes on every single piece of property that has an accessory dwelling. So I do think that part is important, because that's what's going to happen. If you let accessory buildings start going up, you know, people that's in my business are going to be like, well, that's 2 rental properties in one bang. So we can't let that happen.
Well, I want to clarify. We talked about this at the Planning Commission. This is, once you get a permit, once you build something, you're in a slightly different world. This is about how you get the permit. A little bit about how you keep going on, but it's about how you get the permit. So let's say I have a house, and it's a large enough lot, I have enough space, I build an ADU totally detached.
Right.
Put a pin in that, I'm going to come back to the connection or not. And let's say, you know, I die and my estate sells it to somebody.
Mm-hmm.
They don't live there and they rent out both. Can they do that? Right? They're not getting a permit. The structure's already there, right? So you're saying in the beginning of this section that we are putting a restriction on that still. Now, you get into enforcement, you get into checking in on that, and what would be the remedy? Well, fines and injunction. That's what's on the table. So, you know, it's not going to be perfect. You're not going to cover everything. What your zoning ordinance needs to do is espouse the policy you want. Some people are going to get around that policy, and we will work to fight it, but it's never going to catch everything in that net. This is saying, hey, if you do that, you have the chance of getting caught. You have the chance of getting fined $50 a day. You have the chance of getting an injunction against you if you get found out, right? But I wanted to make clear that last sentence, that's about at the application phase, and the direction to the BZA. That once the BZA grants this special exception, they're no longer involved.
I I got you.
right? So it's all back on code enforcement at that point. You could build a mini apartment in your house. You could have the detachment. You're saying, if you're gonna do this, you have to take these extra steps. But if it is a completely separate house, I mean, this is a house, it's a small house, but it is a completely separate house, and our general policy is that you get one per parcel, right? This is an exception to that, a special exception, as the BCA would be evaluating. And so it comes with those parameters. If you really wanted, if the lot's big enough, split it into 2 lots, put a second house, right? Like that would be, that's my other way of thinking about it, is just build another house, even if it's small, get the smallest lot allowed in that zoning district with those setbacks and build a small house, and you can sell it, right? And you can rent it to anybody, you can do anything. This is if it's going to be on one parcel. You've got your main structure and a housing unit behind it. It's a really small set of circumstances that this is coming up in, because if you've got a 5-acre parcel in R1, you can split that in 2 and just build another house, no matter how big, right? We got some minimums, but you put a minimum in here, but it's only covering a very narrow set of circumstances. And again, you're putting forth, what is your policy, knowing that some people might fight it or try to get around it and may never get caught, or maybe they do get caught. That's what you're putting forth. I don't know if you've been working on this more than me, so.
I agree.
And the utilities, everything has to be on the same meter as well. So if you are trying to rent it out to different
Which
entities.
most professional landlords ain't gonna do that. That'd be a pain in the butt, because you don't have separate address, you don't have separate utilities, it's a pain in the butt. So like I said, what you're hurting is you're hurting my friends like down in Bay Minette. That's who you're hurting. And you're saying, hey, you might get caught, you might get fined for doing this. That's the people we're going after. And I have a hard time with that.
Well, if you're separate entities, though, I don't know that I would really want to get into sharing the utilities, the cost of utilities.
Well, so, and again, I'm probably the oddball of the bunch, but if I were going, like for example, I have a garage, and let's say I convert that into an accessory dwelling. I could meter the water and the electrical going to that unit to sub-bill my tenant. So I could read his meter, read his water meter, even though it's not an actual utility meter, and bill Jacob for his part as my tenant.
Is that how this is currently written?
Well, let me try to understand that right, because I've done that before.
It would be a private meter. I would.
Correct. You have your main public meter, but then you could have, you want to know what's going to your garage. I have people on larger land, they want to know how much their farm is using or whatever. That's not getting read by the electric department. So you could, if you're renting it out and you want to know what their portion is, you could put a meter on that line, the electrical line or water line to it. Yes, you could. And that's not going to be violative of this.
Right.
It's just the public line, the public meter is 1 per lot.
And it does concern me. I mean, I'm not totally unaware of the importance. I don't know that it's a good idea that every house on Main Street has an accessory dwelling that you're renting out to somebody that's not in their family.
People on Main Street might have the setbacks.
True. But you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know that, I mean, if you, of course, obviously you'd have to meet these, well, if we leave it as it is, you'd have to meet these guidelines to even build it. If we take this out, then you necessarily wouldn't. I mean, if you could bring it to whoever you want to.
Yes, Scott.
Yes, go. I need more input.
Well, I was going to ask about the electric meters. You can have multiple electric meters at one address.
You have it now.
I have it now. And depending on the distance that your building is from primary building, it makes sense to put an extra meter in for that. Sometimes distance, you can't run, power to your house and then run up to another one. Depends on the distance.
But under this, you couldn't, right, the accessory
Right.
dwellings. Gotcha.
So,
All accessory dwelling units shall have electrical service consistent with the primary structure.
I don't know what that means. Is it same electricity? Or
Same, yes, sir, same meter.
does that mean like from the same company? Does it mean you can't have a separate meter?
designed to not have a separate meter.
Because a lot of people do have separate meters on their
So we
detached
cover
garage.
that.
If you're talking about a storage building or a barn, agricultural purposes, you're not talking about another dwelling unit.
Right.
This
This
is
is
talking
not,
about another building.
yeah, this is not regulating any of the other buildings. You can do that if the electric department will allow it. This is
So-
saying, if you do an ADU,
Right.
it's gonna be part of the electricity that's to the main structure.
See, I don't see where that benefits anybody. Why you could not.
I think it was probably one of the components to make it harder to rent to the general public.
No, I mean,
And remind all of us again, or especially me, the way that our zoning ordinance is written at the moment, are any accessory dwelling units allowed as of right now?
ADUs?
ADUs.
So that got into the code issue, and whether or not there was a kitchen, and the kitchen kicked it over, and so you couldn't.
That's why we're having this conversation, because the zoning ordinance is silent on the issue.
So code said no, once you had a kitchen. So, I mean, could you put a shack in there with a bed? Yeah, you could, but if you want to make it truly a home with all the, toilet, shower, kitchen.
So part of the reason this is coming up is because the zoning ordinance has been violated here in White Bluff, correct? There have been instances where people have put a shed out,
yes.
and they actually went as far as to run separate utilities to it, separate meters, and so they were effectively putting two dwelling units on one lot. And so there's a precedence here that somebody's
Okay.
going to violate it.
Somebody did what they wanted on their own property.
Yeah, I
Okay.
know.
But it's
Imagine
Dang.
that.
It's hard to legislate that, because, you can't, what if somebody decides they're gonna put out 10 tents in their backyard and rent out each tent,
There might be some help out
Who builds an outhouse, this is Tennessee, it'd be all right.
So still want to put my 2 cents in. So if we pick out what we took out last meeting, to where you can rent it to anybody, what, doesn't matter if it has a power meter to it. I mean, you can already have one to any other type of building that you put out in your property, but you can't have it for an accessory dwelling unit. That's nitpicky.
So then at what point does it just become a separate structure and is inconsistent with our other zoning ordinances where we're saying you can only have one house per lot if it's R1?
Well, candidly, I think all of these provisions are up for debate. I'm going to put that out there. The only thing that's going to be a red line for me, and please tell me if you agree or think differently or think there's more, is you can't parcel it off. That's the red line. If you want to modify utilities or anything else, I think that's worthy of discussion, but I'll be a strong advisor against it, because otherwise just parcel it off and go under the code for building a home. This is a specialized type of use. You're building a guest house, a mini home on one parcel, right? It is a separate structure. It's designed to be a separate structure. It just happens to be a little bit smaller. Should it have its own meter? Maybe. I mean, that's a policy decision. Again, a lot of this was designed to keep it all in that umbrella of this is one parcel, this is one owner, we're going to keep it under that umbrella. So everything in here from A through O is kind of reflective of that policy. It's the will of the council to tinker with this, but I will add this, if you change anything other than F, it's going to have to go back to PC. So, just bear that in mind. If that's what you want, we'll make that work, and it can go at the May meeting, it'll come back to you at your June council meeting. But I just want to make it clear that that was the policy consideration of we're going to make this be on one parcel, we're going to allow this to be on one parcel, but it has to stay one parcel, and you can't 5 years down the road come in with a 2-lot plat and separate it out and then sell it and all that. It's gonna be part of this. Otherwise, go ahead and parcel it out and let someone or yourself build a home and rent that out, right? It's a very specialized use.
Well, wouldn't that be, wouldn't you have to take that property itself and change the zoning of it?
Well, depends on the size, right?
Right.
Depends on the size.
I mean, but that's what you're talking about, is if you want to parcel it out, you're basically turning it into R2.
Well, it's R1 or R2, is all the ADUs allowed in. Again,
Right.
because we're under density zoning, without an exact example, I couldn't tell you if R1 or R2 would work for this. I mean, if you're dealing with a 3-acre lot and you want to divide it in half, under R1, you can do that. You can have 2 1.5-acre lots. Or if you have a 3-acre lot and you're like, I want to put an ADU, it has to stay one parcel.
But that's what I mean. I mean, you have to go to BDA or the zoning and get it split up. And officially, instead of 1 R1, it's 2 R1. Or 1
Yes,
R1,
correct.
it's R2 and R2. So, I mean.
And whatever the zoning is on it now, if you just split it up, the zoning stays. And you could ask for different zoning for those parcels later or part of that process. But let's say you get 3-acre R1 lot, and you're like, I want 2 1.5-acre lots. You just come in with a 2-lot subdivision plat and split it up, depending on if you have proper road frontage and all the other aspects that are required. Assuming you could do that, then you've got 2 livable lots with its own setbacks and everything. The ADU under 1 3-acre parcel in this example, you're just dealing with the setbacks for that 3-acre lot. You've got to get it to fit on the side. We can do side, right? The side can't be further than the front of the house or anywhere behind it within the setbacks, right? That's what this is allowing.
Can I ask a couple, everybody's asking some really esteemed questions. I'd like to go more juvenile. Just because, this is, I'm still a rookie. So, just for everybody's knowledge of what you're thinking, like, I tend to agree with Mr. Kincaid on a lot of his arguments. And so several of these questions will be sort of geared in that same regard. When we're listing in the highlighted section here, parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, children, grandchildren, siblings, I guess I'm just not even trying to put eloquent. Why not cousins? Why not great-grandparents? Why not great-great-grandparents? Like, to me, it says these are special people in my life. And I love my brother, but hey, my buddy that lives in Cookville is a good friend of mine too, and like, I just don't feel like we should be defining who should be important in your life and who's not important in your life. So if we were to adopt this language, I think it should be opened up to cousins and great-grandparents are more likely to need this than grandparents. So let's throw that in there. And how many greats do you want to go? And then my question, and I understand that's juvenile, we can roll our eyes at it, but it makes a point, but also I think if you're going to have this language, you should add in a couple of other exceptions. And then, furthermore, my question would be, how do I prove before a board that Brian's my uncle? Do I bring birth certificates? I mean, I'm being serious here. Do I say Brian's my uncle and we just leave it at that?
If you're willing to say it under oath,
Right.
to your perjury?
Sure. Okay. So that would be your correct. Okay. Just clarifying that.
Yeah.
And if we were foster brothers at one time, does that violate this? Like, I'm just asking.
No, so immediate family, this is a pretty typical definition
Is it? Okay,
for
yeah.
immediate family members. You could, I guess the step up would be related, which, if you go back far enough in time, we're all related. Where do you want to go on that line? And again, it was designed to be, and again, it's a policy thing, y'all can shift the policy, that's why it's coming to you for this debate. If you want to move away from immediate family members, to me, a lot of those middle grounds of you have to be related to or you have to be special to, it's not worth it.
Right.
I'd
Exactly.
say get rid of it, or keep it to, I mean, if you want to add great-grandparents and great-grandchildren, I think that would probably be fine. But if you want to go far outside of that, I think it's going to make this virtually meaningless.
Right, no, I understand. Again, I just wanted some clarification on those things, and you've given me that. And then I guess my other question would be, we had a spectacle of a debate last time we were together, and you came up with this blue language, is that correct? What we see in blue. Have you exhausted, and I guess it would be beneficial to know those of us who are for this or against this, it would be nice to have those conversations out on the table, neat and organized, and then have you exhausted your legal language to make this appealing to both those who are detracting from it and those who are advancing for it?
That's a complicated question.
Thank you.
That's a good question.
I draft language, when any process on this, whether it starts at this body, or the planning commission or administratively, really it's the three of us work on the language to then present to the planning commission, right? And it works its way up. Everybody's going to have a different view to little wrinkles, and you try to coalesce around something, right? I draft language based upon your directive. So from our last time, you were like, let's give the BZA some discretion. If the owner isn't the owner yet, but they're getting it built for them, to go ahead and put an ADU. This allowed an ADU in a more broad sense. Then you have to already own the property and then you go build it. Someone else who's owning it, if you're under contract, you could present the contract at the BZA meeting and be like, okay, that's enough for me. I'm okay with that, right? Have I exhausted language? No.
I didn't think so, but there were so many points raised.
Correct.
And there's being a lot of points raised right now. And I was just curious, what, of all the arguments that were made, this blue text here is dealing with the builder wanting to go ahead and build it, even though I'm not currently occupying it. You've dealt with
But
that.
you're intending to,
Right.
That intention can be interpreted by the BZA based upon the testimony given in the hearing.
Right. Okay.
So,
I think, the mayor made a comment about the billboards, and I do agree with you. However, the way I see this is your home. So to me, it's like Happy's or my home. I'm okay with some more restrictions on my commercial entities than I am on my actual home. I do see what staff wants to do, because right now it's not allowed at all. So if I've got a daughter that wants a shed in back, I just don't have anywhere to go, I'm going to sneak a kitchen into my shed without code, build this little she shed, put her in there, regardless of what the code says. At least for this, I'm assuming it's looked at. You're not just throwing up a shed. Because I've seen some of the ones that they've added without any permission, and they're dangerous and they're not wired correctly, and it's on down the street. I'm just really, really torn about, as much as I see the reasoning for wanting it to be just immediate family, I agree with Jacob. If this guy's been used since you fought in the military together, you're best friends, you don't have a brother, but he's your brother, why can he not stay there? It's your home. So that's where I'm really torn.
I think, I do have two more questions, but I think that people are focusing on who can or cannot stay there versus can it be rented? And are you suggesting that your friend would rent the property from you, or that your friend would just stay there as a guest?
I think that's a good point as well, if you're, and maybe that's the bridge, because.
Well, again, it's your property. If your brother from the military goes, hey man, I'll give you a couple bucks while I get on my feet, or maybe your wife's best friend just going through a divorce and she's like, well, I'll give you a couple, $100 or so just to, because I'm here. That's rent. Why can't you do that? That's my thought. So, and you might give them, depending on, hey, I'll give you 3 months to get on your feet, and then after that, could you give me $200 a month, just to whatever? That's still
And I think,
definitively rent.
like Jacob said, everything is based on what you are willing to do. So if I move Carl in there, and I don't tell you guys, and, what are you going to do? You're going to get a warrant to come look? How's that going to even go? And so I don't know that you can stop once it's built. I don't know that you can control it. Because, if you're my best friend and you need a place to stay, I'm probably going to leave you in there. And I'm not going to say anything. And
if he's quiet, you probably won't.
nobody's probably ever going to know.
People are parties,
Also, two more questions. One, accessory dwelling units, depending on how they're built, whether it's a flat foundation or crawl space. If it was a crawl space, technically the ADU could be moved in the future off the property, correct? Because you're a builder, you would know this.
I mean, I would say depending on the size, we could probably move most anything we build.
I mean, in Nashville, literally,
Yes,
I've seen 1,500 square foot homes
Exactly,
or
yeah, I would say that's feasible.
So an ADU is not going to be permanent in the sense like what you were discussing, or where they could just extend the roof line, add on another room, and essentially have an apartment. That's going to be a more permanent forever and ever, unless a tornado hits.
Crawl spaces will still have foundations though.
They do, but it's easier to lift the existing structure if
They did
someone
that.
wanted to
The
do
structure,
it.
but your foundation will still be there.
Yeah, you could just
And then what if
dig
you
it out
do-
with a backhoe.
What if they do want to put it on a slab? So we're telling them that now we're.
I'm just saying, I don't know, this would be his area, but I'm thinking if it's on a slab, it's a little bit harder.
I mean, I would say,
Maybe,
for me, I would say it'd be harder on slab.
yeah,
But
okay.
not impossible.
Not
We can put a ban on that.
From our perspective on the legal enforcement side, if it's crawl space or foundation, it's a permanent building. You're distinguishing that between like a fifth wheel trailer, right, like of what can be moved. Or you take a shed and just put it on a couple blocks, you don't really even have a foundation, that's different to me.
Right.
Rather than when you excavate, get a foundation in there, we treat those as permanent, those are detached units.
I understand that administratively, we think
Right.
that is permanent, but in reality, if you can move a portable shed out of your backyard, you could essentially move an ADU if you wanted to and wipe out the foundation. going forward, if you wanted
On
to
that
do
point, anything can be moved though.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
according to labels and laws and such, foundation is a permanent structure, and that's what you.
But I'm
anything
talking
can be
about having the structure on site, because you're asking, what are you gonna do with it? Well, maybe somebody wants to sell it to someone else as a cool fishing cabin. So maybe they put it on a trailer or a flatbed, whatever, and they haul it off to the Tennessee River. There are other outcomes than, oh, mom has passed away, now we have this empty building in our backyard. There are other options. And I guess my next question, if I've gone off on a tangent, is, so the way that things are written right now, we do not have anything in place for an accessory dwelling unit, correct? So going forward, if we wanted to, could we just completely ban accessory dwelling units as an option as well?
Yeah, I wanted to emphasize, kind of to your point, Mayor, this is a change in your zoning ordinance. You can update it in 6 months, 6 weeks, 6 years. Obviously, I think, not to speak for Amanda or Jeff, but when we open a door, we want to open it a little bit and see how it goes, rather than have it be wide open. But again, it's a policy consideration that y'all get to decide. I think it would be harder if you had no limitations. If you took the yellow highlight out, I think it's going to be harder to pull it back. And that may be okay. But I'd say it's easy to say, let's not have these categories. You can't rent it or lease it, and it can only be to these people staying here, right? And if you all start getting pushback from people, you got 3 or 4 people coming to meetings saying, hey, I really want to do this, you can think about changing that. The only other thing I'll throw out there, and I may regret saying this, but to Councilman Puckett's point, have we legal language this out? No, because you could just put a lot of this discretion on the BZA. That makes me a little nervous, but say, it has to be for, and I'm just shooting from the hip here, some justifiable reason or some connection to the owner. Now, could they lie? Could some Joe from the street rent from them and say, oh, I've known him since we were in high school? Sure, they could, but that's some discretion. Say, look, we're not going to put parameters on it, but there has to be some connection, and we need to figure out if there's language that could work for that. But at the end of the day, you have these 2 sets of restrictions in there. Who can occupy it, and can you lease and rent it or not? And you're saying a small group can occupy it, and it cannot be leased or rented. That's in this version. It is your discretion to take one or both of those out, or leave it in.
What about an ex-husband?
They are not immediate feminists.
See, I was getting kicked out, and I wanted to live in my accessory dwelling unit since I owned the property along with my ex-wife.
Well, if you own it, it wouldn't apply. This is
That's
for
still the
non-owners. Yeah, someone else owns it, it's.
Like Councilman Puckett's point, let's say you got a buddy in the military, saved your life, but he's got TBI now. He's never gonna get anywhere, get married, he needs some help. He's not your family member, but he is your family member in your heart, and, he's living off his disability. Sorry, can't come, unless you extend the roof line. And actually, this is a real interesting thing, because my neighbors right now, this is real time, the next door neighbors, Travis is trying to do, they're actually looking to move their mother-in-law in right now. And so I'm actually told them, I'm like, well, hang on until we pass this bill, I might have to tell you how to build it a different way. Because once she dies, you may or may not want to do something different with it, and depending on how we pass this law, you might want to put a crosswalk in it.
And I think if we're gonna allow it, then, I do like that this requires you to get a permit. So if somebody's looking at your accessory dwelling, it's not just a shed that you bought from, and drug it in there and ran an extension cord with power. I've seen that. So I do like that. I'm afraid if we just squash this and we don't change anything and we leave it like it is, then you're gonna have exactly what's been happening. You're just gonna have people just pull a shed in there and you're gonna be like, oh, it's a shed. Well, no, it's an accessory dwelling. I do like the inspection. I'm just, what we do with the rest of it, I don't know, but I would prefer to have something rather than nothing, because I don't think if we just do nothing, they're gonna continue to just do what they've been doing, which is basically doing it anyway. So.
Well, assuming y'all pass some version on Tuesday, you're going to have something.
Right.
Your debate is how wide open is that, right? That last bit that was added, you're at least you have to be the owner or the intended owner to get an ADU. You have that in there. If you left that, say you strip out all the highlighted parts, you're still making the owner do it. It's not just some 40-unit subdivision coming in and saying, screw your R1, I'm going to put 2 rentable units on each of these, so it's actually 80, and they didn't even go through zoning. So there are some limitations. Now, again, 5 years down the road, you have this, you sell, you move, sell to somebody, they have 2 things that they can rent independently. So they have one owner, but 2 things rented. So are you making it a little harder to just, yes, you are. Is it going to be impossible? No. So it'll be for public hearing on Tuesday, and then y'all will have to make some motion and or amendment, or with the motion, on how you want to see the language in F. And again, you're welcome to examine any other part of this, but if it's a substantial change outside of F, it will have to go back to planning commission.
I have one more juvenile question. I'm living in your accessory dwelling unit, Andrew, and maybe we're not, maybe I'm your brother or something. Okay? and I'm not. I'm living there, and I can't pay you rent under this, correct?
So if you're saying you are an immediate family member?
I'm your immediate family member.
You can contribute.
I can contribute. Okay, then that question asked and answered. Okay.
Yeah.
I understand that the contribute part. Okay. I was going to say, can I offer you? I want to thank you for being so generous. I'd like to give you $1,000. Does that violate rent at that point?
No, we're not saying that's right. We're saying it's a contribution, so you can be whatever you want to be. I think that really came up because certain family members, and I've seen this elsewhere, the mother-in-law, they'll be like, I'll pay for it if you build it. So that's like, here's $100,000, go build me a 1,000-square-foot awesome mother-in-law house behind your house. It's saying that's allowed, right? It doesn't have to be money from the owners. The family member can contribute. So that was it.
So, playing devil's advocate, so if his friend moves in, doesn't pay rent, but because he's his friend, he contributes $800 a month towards the beer fund, you're still good?
Well, the contribution part of it, currently as drafted, it can only be occupied by immediate family members, so the friend would not qualify.
So the friend can't even stay, so now it's not even a guest house, as the mayor was saying, because the friend can't even sleep overnight in it.
So can we go?
Used or occupied by an immediate family.
Okay, so now friends can't even stay over and visit.
They have to
That's
stay
not
on the
good.
couch in the main residence.
Oh, so your friends can't stay over either. So
Don't walk him in.
That's a little concerning, but we can move on. I mean, that, to me, that's, the way that's written, like, that's really concerning, that I'd be in violation of something, and I wouldn't even know that, but.
I think there is a difference between coming to spend the weekend and making that your permanent residence.
I agree, but I mean, what Andrew just said, though, you'd be.
There's not a distinction
There's
under
no
here.
distinction. So if he's supposed to spend the
So,
weekend.
I mean, at least at the bare minimum, Meredith, I think that's something you
Well-
should address, either define or something, but I can be good now. I'm ready to go.
And one other question while we're all here together. So, in this scenario, someone buys this, they get the permit for a family member, they build it, family member passes away, they decide to sell the property, they sold it to a different party. At that point, can that party rent out the ADU
Not as
as
drafted.
is
no.
drafted?
This runs with the land, so it has to be the owner of the property, of the whole parcel,
Yes.
and that owner's immediate family members can use or occupy the ADU.
Because Scott asked a question about, or one of you asked a question about enforcing it. At the planning commission, we did discuss a permitting process where they would have to reapply for a permit once a year, every 2 years, and we decided that was going to be too labor intensive for the codes inspector, so that part was removed. So if there was a permitting process, then yes, somebody would come back and check on a regular basis, but we chose not to go that route.
And I'll just add that that recurring type of permit review is for more temporary uses, and again, this is a full-fledged structure, it's there, so it makes it hard.
I'm glad that was removed, because I don't want Uncle Sam dropping by my property every so many years to take a look at it. I don't know about y'all, but.
Well, I'm just going to say this, and then I'm going to move on. There was a big to-do about billboards not too long ago, and I understand there is a distinction between commercial property and your home where you live. But in terms of property owners' rights, if you own commercial property or you own residential property, that is your property. And in essence, property owner rights should apply to both types of property. So you guys were not okay with having billboards in the center part of town because you didn't want to look at them. In the same vein, there are other people in the community who do not want to have a plethora of accessory dwelling units in the community because they don't want to deal with absentee landlords who are renting these out or people who are not maintaining the property. So if you're going to be concerned about property owner rights, be consistent in your concern about those rights.
Yeah,
And now I'm going to move on.
Again, I object to that, because even on the loan process, there's distinction between commercial and residential. Your
But they are both
You get a
your
different-
property that
they
you want
are.
to do things
But you can
with.
get a different rate on buying a piece of property if you're gonna live in it, and there's actually distinctions on the rate that you get for your loan to buy it.
I'm not
because it's
talking about
owner-occupied.
financials, I'm talking about the heart
Well,
of the
my point is
issue
that
of
it's
property
consistent.
owner
There's
rights.
a difference in commercial and owner-occupied. Everybody sees that distinction, and they're treated differently. That's what we're doing, we're being intellectually consistent because we're treating owner-occupied versus commercial.
Well, I would say
two
the
different things.
people who own the commercial property who are not able to put up billboards now and earn profit from that property, they would probably disagree with you on that point.
You're looking at two of them sitting right here, and I say no.
Okay, all right. At this point, I'm about ready for us to consider banning accessory dwelling units altogether. Altogether.
Well, they're, as we sit here, they're not allowed, so.
It's true, and they're still here, that's where I'm just, it's just such a.
And so when they're in violation, what is the process when somebody violates? Is it just a civil fine, or can
And
it
that's a
actually
really
be
good
removed?
question. If I've got an accessory dwelling right now today, can you legally, as a city, come on my property and prove that?
Yes. You have to go through a process.
Okay.
So it's called an administrative warrant. It's different than a criminal warrant.
Right.
It's similar enough. And then we would actually have to go to Chancery Court for something more than a $50 a day
But
fine.
it is enforceable as we stand if we so
You
desire.
can get to the point of if they don't take it down, you can get an order to take it down and charge them for that cost.
Is this the one extension cord was on from your house?
No, she's gone now, but yeah, it was there. I agree with the mayor, it was there.
Okay, so moving on to streets and sidewalks. Item number 5, we have an ordinance establishing Jordan Street in White Bluff, Tennessee as a one-way street.
Coming up, I've heard a couple things about this.
Mayor, we continue to get calls. The latest incident was school bus versus a FedEx truck, FedEx or UPS, I don't know. Two vehicles like that cannot get down Jordan Street. Apparently the school bus turned into Jordan Street and the school bus elected to then back up, which put them backing up into traffic, which doesn't sound safe. So we continue to get calls about that, asking if we could consider making Jordan Street one way. I've talked to the police chief, I've talked to Chief Deal, and they are in agreement as well that Jordan should be one way, proposing one way from the Highway 70 Old Charlotte Road area northward toward Taylortown Road. So it's back.
I have a question. We've been talking about this for a while, even all the way back in the previous administration, and both times we were told we had existing engineers that were looking at other projects that we were going to ask to look at this as well and make recommendations, and we have yet to get those recommendations. So I'm just wondering where those engineers went, where the recommendation went, and are we just moving?
Well, I mean, yes, we have a project, projected project to deal with this area. It is currently, that was a grant that the town received. We're hearing nothing about that grant now. It's kind of in limbo, I think. But the engineers are in agreement that is a viable solution. So we're asking to just pull this particular situation out and deal with it at this level, if you so choose. And this is an ordinance, so you'll have to have 2 readings. There's no public hearing.
Okay, any questions about Jordan Street? All right. I'm sorry, a double. Okay, item number 6, discuss the offer of a irrevocable dedication to accept Timbercrest Trail into Timbercrest subdivision as a town street.
Yes, ma'am. Timbercrest, the development beside F&M Bank here on Highway 47, they have completed all the requirements for that development. They have petitioned the town now for asking the town to take over that street. It does meet all of our standards. What you have in your packet is the offer of irrevocable dedication form. You also have just some staff comments. The highlighted section, staff recommends acceptance of Timbercrest Trail as a town street. We did ask the Planning Commission to set a appropriate 1-year maintenance bond amount, which they did at their April meeting. They set a bond of $16,792.50. So once, if you all agree to accept the street, then once we get that bond in place, then that would be a town street.
Okay, any questions about Timbercrest Trail?
So this is the actual bond is for $67,170, but they only have to put up $16,792.
So the current bond in place is $67,170. That's in place today. If you accept the street, the planning commission determines the one-year maintenance bond, and it's typically set at about 25% of the current bond. So the 16,000 number that I gave you is the 25%. That was what staff recommended, and that was what the planning commission accepted.
The main.
Yes, yes.
I didn't.
Yeah, the original bond was actually $165,000.
Yep.
And you get a one-time reduction in this performance bond, which they did in 2022, down to 67, because they had done a lot of the work.
Yep.
And then this is the final phase where they're saying, this is town property now, but we make them reduce it to 25% normally, just to say, hey, we're going to take it, but we want some assurances that in 364 days, when we go walk out there, if there's any issues, you're going to fix it. And then if there's no issues, you release the maintenance bond. So you go from performance, reduced performance, to maintenance, to gone. That's the evolution.
Okay, if there's no other questions, we are also looking at, is it a street light addition at 4521 Highway 47 East?
Yes, ma'am. We were, that's there's 4 newer homes along 47 East is the one going towards Burns. There's 4 newer homes that are part of that Hazel Landing subdivision. One of those homeowners there has requested a street light. It's possible we may come back to you on Tuesday with another pole or two. Police are going to go out and take a look at it and see what's appropriate. So we think we want one there, and we might come back with 1 or 2 more. I'm not sure.
Okay, under Parks and Recreation.
Before we go, oh no, I apologize. I just had a question for Jeff. Maybe I'm imagining, did I see somewhere in one of the emails you sent out an update about William Driver Lane?
Yes. And I did take that off because it's good news. The property owner had until the end of April to do the required work on William Driver Lane. He did that work and did it, had the street department there to make sure it was done correctly. So that's resolved.
Will we be then eventually seeing an offer of irrevocable dedicated?
It's a good question, and it is a question that I was going to talk with Andrew about.
Okay.
This was the one that didn't go through the normal process.
Right.
It didn't have a bond, but we reached an agreement rather than getting into litigation that they would eventually just pave it, and they did. How we want to clean it up for the record, we'll deal with that. But yeah, it may come before you, but in terms of the bond being involved, it's not.
Okay. Thank you.
Sir?
And the person who paved it was Deals?
Yes.
Okay, discuss the resolution delegating to the Friends of White Bluff the authority to name areas of the Bibb White Bluff Nature Park and/or interior and exterior rings of the Nature Center.
Yes, ma'am. So the Friends of White Bluff is a local 501c3 nonprofit. Friends of White Bluff has been around over 10 years now, we requested this same procedure when the construction of the Bibb White Bluff Civic Center occurred. The Friends accepted the responsibility. As you recall, Mr. Richard Bibb donated the land to the town and also paid for the structure. And the Friends accepted the responsibility of furnishing the Civic Center with furniture and technology and that kind of thing. So to do that, we offered naming right consideration to certain rooms in the Civic Center and that kind of thing. It worked out well. We would request to do that same procedure again for the Nature Park and the Nature Center. I think there's a lot of options there for fundraising and naming rights, both within the park and within the Nature Center building itself. So it's a process that we've done before.
We would like to do that again to take some of that burden off of the town. If you all see fit, we would appreciate consideration.
Question, this should also allow, I just want to be clear, because I think it should allow, that's what I'm asking, then like, especially with the nature park, so-and-so trail,
Sure.
there's a path up.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
The board's trying to figure out what can be named right now. It's a little bit of a different beast than
Yeah.
the Civic Center was, which has large, rooms and.
The rooms are one thing, but I was like, oh, that's kind of cute, having different trails and paths.
Correct.
There's proposed outdoor classrooms that could be named, things like that.
Okay, any other questions about the resolution? Okay, if there are none, going back to old business, discuss the litter cleanup date. I did reach out to the principal at William James Middle School, and she was very enthusiastic about having students participate in this event. And we both discussed how, with school about to end for this school year, it perhaps would be better if we scheduled something for the fall so that we could have time to organize the event and then promote it within William James Middle School, as well as reaching out to other members of the community. So a date has not been set yet. We just know that we are looking at fall 2025 to do a cleanup date. Okay, and then also discuss the Commerce Advisory Committee members. If any of the council members, if you have someone that you would like to recommend, you certainly take those names. If you yourself would like to serve as the council member on the committee, we would love to hear that as well too. Anything you want to add?
No, I just wanted to clarify, we're only doing one council member on this committee, correct?
Yes, I believe we discussed a council member and then 4 business members starting out for now till we can kind of feel how this is going to work and, work out the details. Okay. Anything about that before we move on?
So are we, you want to recommend business members?
Yes, yes. Business members within the town of White Bluff. I would love it if we could have a variety of different types of business owners. We also discussed about, once this committee is organized, about having a Facebook page or social media pages created so that we can promote our local businesses. We're not trying to compete with the Chamber of Commerce. We're just trying to zone in more on the town of White Bluff and see how we can promote existing businesses.
So, to be a member, is there going to be like a membership for businesses? Like the
I don't think we were wanting to be that structured right now.
Right.
I think this is more just advisory based about, forming a think tank. How can we promote these local businesses in town? Like, we have our Main Street Festival, and we know that's an opportunity for businesses that are located in the core downtown area. That's a good day that we generate a lot of foot traffic for those businesses, but how could we generate business for those that are maybe further out away from the Main Street core area?
Well, I thought one of the issues was we wanted existence from the actual town of White Bluff and be an independent advisory board.
So I'm not suggesting that we form a formal board. This would just be,
You talking about like a Chamber of Commerce type thing?
That's what I'm thinking it needs to be, because it's going to have to support itself.
So, just to make the distinction, at least how I'm viewing this, and if you don't see it differently, please let me know. Chamber of Commerce is an independent thing that's really not going to have a lot of connection to the town. But what a lot of towns, as they see growth and want to help the business community, but also kind of help direct it, and this is the first step, and the mayor and I have talked about this, you have to get some people in the room to start thinking about policy and what are some opportunities. Because if this keeps growing, the next step is to actually enact an economic development formal committee that will have certain delegated powers by this body via ordinance. So it's much more tied into how can the town be partnering to business. if white glove businesses themselves want to create their own chamber of commerce, they can do that, they don't need town. They're very separate, and usually you don't want the government side directly involved with your chamber of commerce. You can have them interact with, but not be like the source of the chamber of commerce, if that makes sense.
Well, I agree, but I'm just trying to eliminate the situation that got this thing started in the first place, where a local business owner was upset because a town sponsor, town entity did not advertise his business like he thought it should have been.
Well, I think this entity, or really it's not an entity, it's an ad hoc committee,
Right.
can talk about ways to address that and not let that happen again.
Okay, so this is like a stepping stone to an official, something like,
Like a standing committee that has powers that shall outline, but it has to start somewhere, and I think the mayor's right in that you've got to get somebody from up here who wants to serve, and some business members in a room to say, how can the town support local business?
right.
So, for instance, the Parks Board is heavily involved in the Main Street Festival, correct?
Yes.
So, if we had a council member who's meeting with these local business owners and generating ideas, things that they would like to see implemented, then perhaps we can involve the Parks Board, or we can help, gather the resources to enact those things, to make them happen. So that was my thought.
Right. I mean, I originally thought that we were going to do something to promote our local business opportunities and stuff like that. That would not be a part of the town itself.
Would it be permissible for the town to perhaps in the future contribute a small amount of money for marketing or just resources? So if the committee says, hey, we think we want to do advertisement somewhere, the town can maybe help fund that.
Yes, and I'll add, I've got another jurisdiction that's finishing up its economic development analysis and ordinance and everything, so we'll actually have some templates to use for y'all to consider, but this is, I like the stepping stone, this is the first step in trying to figure that out. And it could go any number of directions, but to be clear, it will not be a white glove chamber of commerce. That would have to be something separate.
Well, I know that we don't get much of a help from the Dixon County Chamber of Commerce, and that's why I thought we were going to do something like that on our own, try to nurture and get it started, and then say,
And that may be one of the policy things that comes from this committee, say, hey, we want to encourage local businesses to go create a white glove chamber of commerce. That may be a recommendation, right? But it would still be separate.
There was a White Glove Merchants Association maybe 15 years ago, and it was pretty active for a while, but like all things, it requires maintenance and, new blood, and it kind of fell by the wayside, I think, after a while. So that's why I was suggesting maybe if a council member is involved, then we can kind of keep the town connected, not running it, but just be connected somehow.
I like that White Glove Merchants Association, but I would also like to include industry in it too. That way, Nashville Wire's got some openings, what to fill. And they put that in on the social media and stuff like that. But still be entirely not White Glove government.
Sounds like it. Okay, any other questions about that? If not, we will move on to item number 8, which is discuss the bids for mowing of the town-owned properties. And Jeff, do you want to discuss this because you were at the bid opening?
Yes, ma'am. So we put out for bid, as the mayor said, mowing town-owned properties. We advertised for that in the Dixon Post. That ad came out April the 2nd. We also had the information on the town's website as well as Facebook. You had 4 bids. We did the bid opening yesterday at 3 o'clock. You had 4 bids returned. You see those on the bid tab document. Prices range from $30,000 to $125,000.
Were there more bids that perhaps were incomplete, or was it just 4 total bids that were received?
No, ma'am, there were 4 bids.
Okay.
Have we worked with any of these guys before?
Justin Hayes Lawn Care and Landscaping is who currently does the town's mowing. And just as a point of differentiation, this bid is for like mowing from red light to red light, mowing the town here, town hall, the bid center, fire hall. What our street department does is mows any of the streets and intersections that cuts the weeds back for safety purposes and that kind of thing. This is for more of the finished mowing, more of the pretty mowing, that kind of thing. So, yes, we've worked with Justin for a number of years. I remotely know of Hunter Hagler. He does a couple of jobs here in town, and that's in town owned.
No, you go ahead.
Why aren't we putting out the bid and doing all of our mowing? I mean, aside from the fact we just bought a nice new mower and tractor.
And to piggyback off that, and/or why aren't we doing this mowing? Either one.
So so we would request another street department employee to do that. And if, for example, you were to take the low bid, I don't think you can hire an employee and pay benefits and come in that cheap.
Also, is it an equipment
And
issue?
you'll have an equipment, yeah, I mean, because we don't have that equipment.
So the equipment that we currently own is more for rough mowing, like the
Yeah,
right-of-way.
Bush hog,
Part of what was requested in this is, like you said, more finished mowing, but it also includes edging, and it also includes a certain amount of mulch that was called out within the bid.
tree trimming, shrub trimming, that kind of thing.
Gotcha. It's more like DTR type stuff.
So we will discuss this more on Tuesday night and vote on it then. Okay, before we adjourn for the evening, I meant to point this out at the beginning. Communication from the board will be presented Tuesday night. But the 2025-2026 budget was initially on the agenda for this month of May. We are still making revisions to the budget for this upcoming year. So if you have any questions about that, if there are things that you want the department heads to include, first discuss it with the department heads. If you feel like what you're requesting does not align with what they want to do, then reach out to me. But the budget is still in progress, and it will be read at the June meeting. The second reading will be July 1st, so if it's passed, it goes into effect immediately, so it will be in effect July 1st. Anything else you want to add about that?
I just wanted to provide a very brief update. I know there's some questions about some research items, and I won't, there's nothing to vote on for Tuesday, so I'll tell you tonight, probably June, they'll be in the form of legal memos for you to review. The first one is, do we have the ability to alter who votes in our elections? And the answer is yes. I'm going to find out the parameters of that. And what I mean by that is, for example, I know you can't live in Colorado, own a little strip of land here, and be able to vote in our elections. You have to be a resident of Tennessee, and I want to make sure y'all are aware of the parameters, because we would have to put that in there. We have a private act charter, so we have to go through the process of amending our charter. So that would be something we would want to do before the end of the year, so we could take it up first thing to the General Assembly in January. So it would be in effect for the 2026 elections. Regarding home rule and term limits, and the reason they're tied together, you are not empowered either through charter or ordinance or anything to to put term limits on elected officials. In order to do that, you would have to switch to home rule. And for those who don't know, there's really only 3 ways you could be incorporated as a city in Tennessee. Prior to 1953, everyone was a private act. You drafted your whole charter, which is your mini constitution for your jurisdiction, and the legislature passed it, and that's for your jurisdiction. We are a private act. City of Dixon is a private act. Athens is a private act. Charlotte's a private act. Vanderbilt is a private act. If you incorporated, and this is the hard date, after 1990, but even before, in certain instances, you're under a general law. So there's 3 types of governments that are just out there as a general law. You may have heard of Board of Mayor and Alderman, or Board of Commissioners. Fairview's a Board of Commissioners. They're under a public act, which means every city that adopts that has the exact same charter. You don't have the ability to amend it for yourself. That's one of the downsides. The last type is home rule, which is much more similar to a private act, but after you go through it, you're no longer going to the legislature to change your charter. You don't have that option anymore. It is a referendum at the general election. So I'll have some pros and cons. Money's going to be a big factor. Does it affect any of our tax revenues from the state? I think we're going to think about that. But that's the only way to be able to add term limits. So you have to adopt it. That'd be 2026, and then you have to put on the ballot the 2028 term limits. So it wouldn't apply till after the 2028 election, so it would only apply to officials elected in 2030. So it is a process, but if you wanted to start it, you could. But home rule is a really big change. There's 346 municipalities in Tennessee. 14 are home rule. That's like 4%. And those are, most of them, not all, are the big boys. It's Chattanooga, Johnson City, Knoxville, Memphis, Mount Juliet, Oak Ridge, Sevierville, who really want to have separation from the General Assembly and not go to them asking for amendments. They're going to take care of themselves. But that also means there's not this plethora of information about how home rule is affecting people. The sample size is a lot smaller than all the other types. So I will have answers for you. It's just going to take a little bit of time. It would be a big change. So sometimes we've had to change our charter, and we can do it fairly quickly and go to the legislature. That's not going to be on the table, unless you wanted to have a special election, and those cost $20,000 to $30,000 a pop if you didn't do it quickly. So there's just things I think you're going to have to think about. So I'm going to try to get you something this summer so you can be chewing and mulling as we go into football season, and maybe by the end of the year you've reached a conclusion on that. And you don't have to treat home rule and term limits in the same boat as property voting, because that's available now. You don't have to switch to home rule to change who gets to vote, and property rights allowing you to vote while you don't live in the city limits. But I'll have both of those for you, and you can decide. But those would be 2 separate resolutions you would have to pass to send up to the legislature, and then hopefully they come back and you'd vote again. And that's a multi-month process. So that's my brief update.
I know we've talked a couple times, I know at least 2 or 3 times, about having for consideration the cost for this upcoming budget for overlays and of that nature. I know we've talked a few times about overlays and what it would, what we could do in-house versus what we have to outsource to a third party. And I'm just wondering if we've been able to get those numbers on how much that would run for at least consideration for this upcoming budget.
I don't have those at the moment, but let me talk to the mayor and Amanda about that. And I know we talked about 74 door and things like that, but we'll add it to the list.
Thanks.
Yes, sir.
So you're talking about the first thing as far as people who can vote in our election. Does that coincide with people who can actually be in the election and be elected?
That's in the Constitution. You have to be a resident within the municipal limits to run for office. This is about who gets to cast a vote on that ballot.
No ifs, ands, or buts.
Correct.
Okay. So if I'm a property owner, but not live on that property, because there's not a house, do I still get to?
As it stands right now, you have to reside in a municipal limits, period. There are some jurisdictions, Fairview's one of them, that says if you own land in the jurisdiction, you also get to vote in their elections. So
How do we get to that?
I'm going to get you a memo.
Okay, thank you.
But I think what he was asking, what Scott was asking was
To run for
to
office.
to run for office.
You got to live here, period.
I have.
That's not going to change, y'all can't change that.
One budget question. So in the past, as we all have been here, so, and I didn't really realize this until I've been on council for a couple of years, but the request of the department heads came to city administration. We were shown what the budget was after it was cut. And so we didn't really get to see what department heads had asked for. We just got to see what staff would like to see passed. Last year, that wasn't the case. And a lot of people blamed the mayor, not present mayor, past mayor. But in reality, she presented what was asked for. And so we passed that based on what was asked for. So what I would love, if possible, is if staff does make cuts, because it can be uncomfortable for department heads. I've tried to dig in the past, they're hesitant to say what they asked for compared to what got presented. I would love for us to be able to see, okay, this is what got presented, these are the cuts we made, and this is why. Because that gives us a better understanding of, because a lot of people is like, well, why haven't we bought a fire truck when they were in such bad shape? Well, because it never was presented. And so even if he asked for it, and I don't know if he did or didn't, but we didn't see it. And so, and that's one of my bigger concerns. I'm not opposed to cuts. I would just like to know if they're cut, what was cut, and why we felt it needed to be, if that's fair.
And I would love for that too, but I would also love for our department heads to type these things up and have them legible so that we can present them in a professional and formal manner. Not on the back of a napkin. And then I would be happy to share those with everyone.
I appreciate that, definitely. Thank you.
Yes. Anything else? Okay, we're adjourned.
Beer board meeting.
Beer board meeting.